Joining me this morning for her reaction to what happened yesterday is Janine Jones. Her brother, Marc Payton, died in 2003, aged 41, after being infected with both HIV and hepatitis. Marc was given contaminated blood products to treat his haemophilia at an NHS clinic at Treloar, a specialist boarding school. The inquiry found pupils at the school were treated as objects for research, often without consent and despite knowledge of the risks. The school yesterday said it was devastated by the ordeal of former pupils and would reflect on the findings. So welcome, Janine. How did it feel yesterday, finally hearing the truth told?
Validation, mainly. Validating that what we've been saying for the last 40 years was right.
Tell us about your brother, because he was really unlucky in that he got all the available infections, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah.
And it totally wrecked his life. I mean, he was 13 years old when he was infected at school. He was told about his HIV infection in 1985, when he was 23 years old.
And that was when it was a very stigmatised condition.
Yeah, it was awful.
Did he suffer for that?
No, because he kept things to himself.
Right.
Yeah, there was only other haemophiliacs that he knew.
Yeah. He must have been really aware, though, of the infection rate among his friends who were haemophiliacs.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, he knew families in the Birmingham area where we're from that had a lot of vandalism to their houses and the grave sites of their, deceased. It's just absolutely horrendous what some people went through.
And when they gave him the infected blood, it was to help his blood clot because he had haemophilia, is that right? So they gave him the plasma, basically.
Yeah.
Did they at the time know that it was infected, do you think?
Yeah.
So they were basically thinking, we'll just give this a go and see what happens.
Yeah. They've known for a long time before he was given it.
It was infected because it was sourced from particularly poorer people, prisoners in the States.
Yeah.
And if you have one bad batch, it's all mixed together and it's all infected.
Yeah.
It's just, looking back, it's just so obvious, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah.
So tell us about his life. Tell us about how he managed.
Well, for 6 years after he'd left the school, he had a relatively normal life until he was told about his infections, obviously. 1979, he left the school. He was a punk rocker, into his music, played in bands, did a lot of things, ended up buying motorbikes and touring everywhere. And he did love life.
Bless him.
He really loved life. He was a very funny person, really weird sense of humour, a big joker, which I miss terribly.
He got married, did he?
He did get married, but that marriage failed.
And that was that because of his illness?
Yeah.
But he was married twice, I think.
He was, yeah.
Yeah.
So the first marriage fell apart during the 91 litigation.
Yeah.
And then his second marriage fell apart because of his hep C infection. It changed him as a person.
Did it?
Yeah.
How so?
Big depressive moods. He did try and commit suicide a couple of times, which I only found out about after he died. But yeah, it really changed him, changed his personality, his whole outlook. He was very angry, very angry.
And the school he was at, Treloar, is mentioned in the report.
Yeah.
More than mentioned.
Yeah, we've got a whole chapter on it.
Yeah, well, exactly, because it was essentially, but there were a lot of kids with haemophilia there.
Yeah.
There was an NHS office attached to it, and they seem to have known what they were doing.
Yeah.
And that's quite clear from the report, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, very clear.
So what, let's just... I even saw the phrase, we don't have guinea pigs, we've got haemophiliacs.
Yep. Yep, they were a unique cohort of boys in one place.
Yeah.
And that's what they were used for.
We're so far on now, a lot of the people who were responsible are dead, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I don't know what you feel about prosecutions.
I'd like to see prosecutions, personally. I think there's a lot of people in government that need to be held account, especially to try and find out who actually destroyed papers that should not have been destroyed.
That really, at the school, that really stands out, that stuff was shredded and everything else.
Yeah.
Tell us about the members of your family as well who are also seeking justice. You know, obviously, you know, Marc's former partners, parents.
Yeah, our parents have sadly died in the last 4 years. So they knew that the inquiry was taking place, and they were more than happy.
That's him with his mum.
That I was going to get justice for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, sadly they both passed away without any acknowledgement.
They
for his
must have
death.
known everything that the inquiry said yesterday.
Yeah.
Did they? They worked it all out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that they didn't know, which I'm grateful for, is the fact that he was used as a guinea pig. That has only come to light in, you know, the last few months. So.
Well, it's hard to hear, Janine, isn't it, Gina?
Every story, I mean, we see the numbers, but every story is so tragic.
Yeah.
And the human cost is not just the victims, but the extended families and the way they had to lead their lives. And I'm finding it really hard. I tried to read the summary of the report. I'm finding it really hard to get my head around the sense of so many failings at so many levels and so many institutions that everyone seemed to have known. It's not that they didn't know, but also the fact that in the UK, we were so late, because other countries had already realised that there was a problem in the 90s.
Newspapers. I was a teenager, I was reading newspapers that said blood plasma has HIV, why are they still using it?
But
they were still using it.
But the US was known as sort of the OPEC of plasma. It was sending it to everywhere. So we had investigations in the 90s in Japan, in France, in Israel, in all other countries. Why were we so late? Why has it taken us such a long time? There's something... you know, we keep talking using these words.
Is it like the postmasters?
Failure.
Is it like where you just, unless you really knock the door down, it never opens?
But why
we
here? Why here?
Why do you think, James?
I think we have a real problem with questioning our institutions.
Yeah, I do.
And I think that there is part of this where there is some kind of view by the public that if it's owned by the state, then it must be all right and we can trust it, and it's almost without protest. And so, for example, we have, you know, the religion of the NHS, the altar at which you must... And, of course, there are amazing people who work there. There are incredible operations, but we can't seem to
always
separate.
Feel you have to say that. In this case, the NHS is to blame.
Well, it
for a lot
is,
of
but this is the point. And
why do you have to add there are lots... We know there are lots of...
Yes, I know, but this is the point, is that because, for whatever reason, we look at these things in a very binary form, we can never see the whole cross-spectrum. And the cross-spectrum here is that I understand the personal desire to go for prosecutions and the wish for closure and the wish to find who was responsible. But in fact, we need to look at the institutions that failed, the failures in the process that we have, and the fact that it took 4 years to do this report. And God knows that they won't even say how much that report cost. No. And then we got £10 billion that all of us as taxpayers we're going to end up paying.
But Jeremy, go back to what you said. I remember Anita Roddick, who actually had a blood transfusion when she gave birth, and she died because of that. So the story is the government's. It was known by government after government after government. But what is it culturally and in our institutions that means that we aren't willing to actually say criminal prosecution shouldn't be talked about now? They should have been talked about then, because now I think it's too late in a way. But there is something wrong with us as a culture where we think people in positions of power are somehow better than us, and therefore we shouldn't question them.
Well, I hope that's changing. Probably that's changing now as a result of this, is it?
Hopefully.
Yeah. Just before we let you go, just tell us your fondest memory of your brother.
Just the way he was so funny. I mean, he used to make my life a misery when I was a small child. He used to get into all sorts of naughty things that he shouldn't have been doing, and I always got the blame, even though he was older. He'd always blame me for it. But that I mean, and the way he was with my son, obviously because he couldn't have children himself, he looked on my son as his own. So,
well, thank you very much for coming in.